They say the mirror doesn't lie. They say it shows you who you are. But what if it doesn't show you at all? What if it shows you what's coming? In the dusty, forgotten attic of the old St. Jude's orphanage, a mirror leaned against the wall. It was ancient, its silvering spider-webbed with cracks, its heavy frame shrouded in a century of neglect. The locals thought it was just a piece of junk, but it wasn't a mirror. It was a gate. And it had been waiting for a very, very long time. 6 volunteers arrived on a crisp autumn morning, their vans kicking up dust on the gravel path. They were here to renovate the long-abandoned orphanage, to breathe life back into its decaying walls before its grand reopening. Each of them carried their own baggage. Lena, the nurse, was running from the memory of a patient she couldn't save. Mark, the historian, was chasing an obsession with local folklore. The quiet janitor was escaping a past he refused to speak of. And the twins, Elara and Finn, were bound by a shared trauma they couldn't name. They all came for different reasons: guilt, redemption, curiosity, escape. They found the mirror on the very first day, hidden under a grimy canvas sheet in the attic. As they heaved it upright, a collective gasp filled the air. It was huge, magnificent, even under the layers of grime. But as they peered into its depths, they saw something unsettling. The mirror didn't reflect their faces. It showed the room behind them, perfectly detailed but empty. Then, as they stared, a flicker, a shadow. It showed something standing behind them, something that wasn't there. Yet, the first to see it clearly was Lena. As she wiped a clean spot on the glass, she saw the reflection of a small child standing just over her shoulder. The child was pale, its clothes soaked, its eyes like empty wells staring into nothing. A chill ran down her spine. She spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. There was nothing, just motes of dust dancing in the weak sunlight. She tried to laugh it off, blaming the old glass, the strange light. That night, sleep offered no comfort. Lena was jolted awake by a sound, a soft, rhythmic dripping. Then, footsteps, small, wet, pattering down the hallway outside her room. Her breath hitched. The footsteps stopped right at her door. Slowly, the doorknob began to turn. The door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of the child from the mirror. It stood there, dripping water onto the floorboards, its gaze fixed on her. Then its mouth stretched open, impossibly wide, splitting its face sideways. A gurgling voice, like waterlogged lungs trying to speak, whispered, "You healed others, but you never healed me." Lena opened her mouth to scream, but the sound died in her throat. No one in the sleeping orphanage heard her silent terror, but the mirror did. It watched from the attic, its surface shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The next day, Lena was gone. The others found her room empty, her bed neatly made, but a small, wet puddle stained the floor by the door. Unease settled over the group like a shroud. Mark, the historian, was fascinated by the mirror. He ignored the growing dread and focused on the intricate carvings that adorned its frame. He saw symbols he vaguely recognized, dates stretching back centuries, and a long list of names etched into the wood. As his fingers traced the inscriptions, he froze. One name, almost worn away, was his own, Marcos, an ancestor. Compelled by a force he didn't understand, he pressed his thumb against the name. The glass didn't just ripple, it liquefied. A shape began to push through the silver surface, emerging not from behind the glass, but from within it. It was a grotesque creature stitched together from yellowed book pages, its spine made of ancient scrolls, its long, spindly fingers dripping thick, black ink. It unfolded itself into the attic, its paper skin rustling. A dry, rasping voice echoed in Mark's mind. "You wrote me out of the history books. Erased me, but I remember." The creature lunged, and Mark scrambled backward, tripping over old furniture. He fled, the sound of rustling pages and dripping ink chasing him through the labyrinthine halls of the orphanage. The mirror watched his desperate flight, its reflection showing not the chase, but an empty hallway, waiting. The janitor, a man of few words and a perpetually haunted expression, had avoided the attic since that first day. But the mirror didn't need him to come to it. As he was polishing the brass fixtures in the main hall, he caught a reflection in the polished metal. It wasn't his own face. It was the mirror, and it was showing him a room he had never entered, a small storage closet under the main staircase. Inside the reflected room, a monster made of countless keys writhed and shifted, a metallic monstrosity of brass and iron. Each key, he knew instinctively, unlocked a memory he had spent a lifetime burying. The thing of keys turned its non-face towards him, and a chorus of voices, like the jangling of 1,000 keys, whispered in his mind, "You buried me in silence. But I have the key to every door you locked." The janitor sank to his knees, hot tears streaming down his face as the sound of the keys grew into a deafening, metallic song, a symphony of his forgotten sins. The twins, Ilara and Finn, were inseparable. They did everything together, a habit born from a childhood fear of being alone. They finally ventured to the attic, drawn by a morbid curiosity. They stood before the mirror, side by side, and for the first time it reflected them, but not as they were. It showed them as old, broken people. Ilara was in a wheelchair, her face a mask of bitterness. Finn was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by despair. They were standing apart, glaring at each other with a hatred that chilled them to the bone. Before they could process the horrifying vision, a new form emerged from the glass. It was a monstrosity with 2 heads on a single twisted torso, its flesh stitched together with scraps of family photos and torn promises written in childish handwriting. It spoke with 2 voices, overlapping and discordant. You were never whole. You were never safe. The twins screamed and turned to run, to escape the abomination that was a twisted mockery of their bond. As they fled in opposite directions, a loud crack echoed from the attic. The mirror's surface split down the middle. In the hallway below, so did they. An invisible force tore them apart, their screams cut short. Only one volunteer remained, but the story wasn't over. The mirror was never cursed. It was a collector. It didn't create the monsters. It simply gave form to the fears, the guilt, and the lies of those who looked into it. Each terrified reflection fed it. Each dark secret shaped it. The volunteers weren't chosen at random. They were the final pieces of a collection centuries in the making, their specific torments the perfect fuel for the gate. Weeks later, the orphanage reopened its doors. Sunlight streamed through newly cleaned windows. The scent of fresh paint filled the air. A group of excited children, the first new residents in 50 years, explored their new home. They raced up the stairs, their laughter echoing through the halls, and found their way to the attic. There, they discovered the magnificent old mirror. They gathered before it, their small faces filled with wonder. But the mirror didn't show them their own reflections. It showed them the 6 volunteers. Lena, Mark, the janitor, Ilara, and Finn. They were all there, inside the mirror's world, smiling brightly, waving at the children. But their smiles were stretched too wide, their waves too frantic. And if you looked closely, you could see their mouths were open, their eyes wide with terror, screaming silently, trapped forever behind the glass. The children just giggled and waved back. If this story made your skin crawl and your thoughts spiral, then subscribe to Truths Untold. We have more stories that reflect your deepest fears, your buried truths, and the monsters that might be waiting in your own mirror. Like this video, share it, and tell us in the comments what you think you'd see. Because some reflections aren't yours. They're warnings. Thanks for watching.